Writing from the soul is the mother of all invention, and 21 Grams is back for another season of this exploration. We will look into the artist and the art they create. Except, this season we're adding the questionnaire, invented by the great Bernard Pivot, to go even deeper. They say 21 grams is the weight of the soul, and this show is the scale. So now here's your host for 21 grams, Joe Compton. Hello, everybody. Good evening. Another wonderful Monday night, and we're here with another episode of 21 grams. And look who I have, everybody. It's Paul Davis. I'm real excited to have you. Thank you for being here, sir.
Yeah, thank you for the opportunity. I'm excited to be here too.
So I always like to start this show by giving everybody who comes on it the opportunity to kind of give a little bit of background about themselves, tell a little bit about you, and just, whatever you'd like to say.
Yeah.
The floor is yours.
All right. Thank you. Again, thank you. It's great being on here. And my name's Paul. I come from the Milwaukee area, born and raised there, with a brief stint in Eastern Kentucky to teach. I was a secondary English education teacher. Loved it for many years. Got several kids into NaNoWriMo, wrapping up NaNoWriMo myself right now. And I just have loved writing since like second grade. I've been writing since then, fan fictions up until high school, then trashy fantasy novels. In college, I did try for a creative writing degree and realized there's not a lot of money in it. And then found out there isn't in teaching either. So now I actually run a business selling restaurant equipment, and I write on the side, and I was writing a lot. Like during COVID, I published 4 books, and I'm trying to get back into it. And this I thought was a good opportunity. And outside of the writing, I have a daughter who I love dearly. She's 4. She's obnoxious, and she'll go for whatever she wants. And yeah, that's kind of a quick rundown of who I am.
Nice. And Tiffany says hello. Brianna says hello. Hello. Welcome. It's, fascinating idea. We all look to try and find the time to write, right? And it's like life gets in the way, things just happen, and it's very interesting to kind of navigate through all that and riding the wave of creativity when you have it. And it sounds like you're somebody who really, when you find it, you try to ride it as long as you can. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, I actually try to force it as often as possible.
That's another characteristic of us all.
Yep. Like the words aren't going to be pretty today, but there will be words, and they can be pretty tomorrow. That's fine.
Yeah.
But yeah, when I was writing, I mean, I probably wrote 20 to 30,000 words a month at least.
Wow.
And then try to kick it up to 50,000 for Nano. And if I had a story idea, I wanted to get that story idea going as quick as possible. So, yeah.
That's awesome. Yeah, it's funny because you and I are kind of like bizarro each other, because you kind of made your teeth and bones in fantasy, and kind of then dabbled a little bit in crime thrillers. And like me, I made my bones and teeth in crime thrillers, and then I'm dabbling in fantasy at the current moment. So it's kind of interesting and fun. And it makes me think about, and I've had a lot of these conversations on this show. This has actually been a real big topic of this show in particular, and that is the idea that genre boundaries don't really exist anymore. They don't really matter all that much as they might have 15 years ago, 20 years ago, when you were worried if you were making a headway as a fantasy writer to switch genres all of a sudden and lose your audience. That doesn't seem to be the case anymore. People are more well-rounded reading wise and everything like that. Was that ever a thought in your mind about, tackling other genres, or did you have just the adventurous spirit to just go, you know what, I want to write what I want to write?
Fantasy and science fiction, where I want to write what I want to write. I
Uh-huh.
got into crime thrillers actually because of my dad. Dad, he read all my fantasy books. He said he loved them. Reading isn't his thing. Fantasy's not his thing, but he grew up on like 007. He
Nice.
he loves, yeah, like mafia type stuff. And so I'm like, okay, I'm gonna delve into some of the crime thrillers so dad can read a few books that he'll like. So
Nice. That's cool. I love that motivation. That's a pretty nice motivation to do something like that. TW is here, and Brianna says, "If only the words could be just pretty all the time." Yes, that would be nice.
So TW is Tyler and then Brianna are all in my little like writing group that we
Oh,
have.
nice.
A lot of fun. So
Nice. Well, welcome. It's nice to have you all. Yeah, it's and I'm curious. Did you find an interesting parallel in writing both in both genres? Was there something specific that you thought was interesting about writing both of them that you didn't expect would be similar?
yes, but I didn't find it in writing.
Okay.
I had a friend in college who was huge into romance novels. And so on kind of a dare, she read some sci-fi, though she likes sci-fi anyway, so she didn't lose anything. And I read a romance about cowboys. And it taught me a lot about suspense. And that even in romance, suspense is very similar to if it wasn't a thriller, if it was in fantasy, it looks different. What you're waiting for is very different. But reading the beats, seeing the pacing, it's suspense for the romance. And so that kind of opened me up to how a lot of these beats and a lot of the anticipation, what you're anticipating changes, but the way that the anticipation flows is very similar. So I found suspense and anticipation to be extremely similar.
Did you in writing in writing fantasy too, there's a world building aspect of it. With crime thrillers, you're kind of usually, even if it's pastime, like if you're writing noir or something, even in the future, even at times, there is a little bit more aspects of reality that already that you're implementing into those things. And you've done urban fantasy before too, so there's a little bit of that in that aspect of it. Is the world building something you really love to do? Is that an enjoyment of yours, or do you rather be rooted in reality a little bit?
I actually have a lot of massive maps with locations that have 10-page write-ups on their 3,000 year history that will never see the light of day.
That's awesome.
Yeah, I love world building. That is a huge passion of mine since high school. Like I would do the whole, there was an accident on Earth that shifted everything, and what would Earth look like if something happened? So yeah, yep, no, love the world building. I do. There is something nice though about the real aspect where you just kind of, you already have the bones. It's not like you have to create something from whole cloth. You've got the base, and you don't need to really, you don't have to introduce Washington State to someone.
Yeah.
They have an idea, and if they don't, they can Google it. Like,
right.
So
yeah, but in the same breath, you do have to character build in those aspects. So do you find that's kind of the similar exercise for you?
I would say so. Yeah. I usually actually start with well, no, that's not always the case. With my fantasy, I start with the plot. Like this is the point in history that's occurring. And then I find my characters to view that through. When I am doing like crime thrillers and such, I actually pants it. I'm not a planner when I do crime thrillers. It's like, here are characters, here's their MacGuffin or whatever, their briefcase. And now they just wander through, like the item becomes not as important as the interaction between the people. So I would say, yeah, when I do fantasy, I become more of a plot driven, but when I do something more modern, I become more character driven. So,
and you're a big outliner for the fantasy. You like to do outlines.
Huge outlines that I proceed to ignore and rewrite, but huge outline.
Yeah, we always have that. That's a conversation we've always had since I started, talking to authors. Is the idea that we're all somewhere in the middle. Usually, not everybody has a rigid viewpoint of, plotter versus pantser, and that. I mean, but it often tends to be the plotters that have a little bit more of a rigid outline than, because they stick to the outline and stuff like that. It's nice to hear that the outline goes out the window sometimes for you.
Oh yeah. My outline's good for about 2 chapters. And then it's redoing the outline. But if I don't have the outline, I struggle through those 2 chapters.
So curious, the times you've done Nano where you've done fantasy, do you outline it prior to Nano, or is that part of the writing process for you? Do you count that as part of the Nano experience?
Usually I try to use October to plan everything out. To get characters in place, setting in place, and then a general plot line. This year, it feels like, April, and then it was November. So I had 3 days, I slapped something together and started writing. But yeah. No, and Nano's good and just a very nice, like, focusing. It's a lightning rod to help focus the ideas. So
nice. How many times have you published something that you've worked through Nano? All the time? Every time?
I want to say only like 3 or 4. And I think I've only won Nano once. Like I'll get 30, 40,000. I'll hit 50,000 if I include my notes, but I don't include my notes. So, yeah.
Tyler said, we pantsers are along for the ride, same as the reader. It's more fun that way. I don't know. Sometimes I wish I was a little bit more of a plotter, to be honest.
So do you pants then?
I do most of the time, yeah. I mean, I'm kind of in between. Like, so I come from a film background, so screenwriting for me, there's a natural plotting aspect to it because you're setting up scenes and you're putting scenes together, and what scene goes to what scene. And so the way I approach novel writing is kind of the same idea. Is like, I know I've pretty much got the scenes that I'm going to go through, and I know the beginning, the end, and the middle, and I have to fill in all the details for that. That's basically how I work. So,
gotcha. Yeah.
It's but it always evolves over time, right? And every experience is a little different. So
yeah, yep, it very much is. There have been people who've talked to me. I do a lot of editing and kind of mentoring because of my teaching background. Like, hey, this is how the writing process looks. But in talking to them, like, yeah, every novel you write is going to look a little different than the last one you wrote.
Yeah.
In the planning and everything.
And you hope at some point you get better at it.
Yeah. Sometimes I feel like I'm not getting better at it.
Yeah.
And then I read my first novel and I'm like, nope, definitely getting better. I'm definitely getting better. That is so bad.
Yeah, I'm doing this mistakenly stupid thing of going back into my first book, because of my first book, I had only intended to it be a standalone, and I ended up writing a second book and writing a third book to it. And so we wanted to tie all 3 of them together because they don't really connect. So I had to go back and do a little rewriting for that. And I just found that I'm such a different writer than I was when I first wrote that I'm pretty much rewriting the whole thing at this point. So
How long ago was it?
2010 is when I published it. I wrote it in 2002, 2003, somewhere around there. So
Oh yeah.
Yeah, 20 years later.
I can't imagine. That would be a very different experience.
Yeah. This is so true too. Brianna says that what our first novels, if not cringy benchmarks of how far we've come. Yeah, I think so too. Every author has that thought about trying to get better or not getting better at the moment that they're writing it, right? So
yeah, yep. And sometimes it takes reading that first novel to remember.
Do you go back and read your old stuff?
When I was trying to create more of a cohesive world Bible, so ideally I would have one world and tons of novels within it. I would also use it as kind of a training ground for younger authors who might want to write fanfics in order to find it easier, and then coach them like through publication. So when I was doing that, I would read through my old novels, but at this point, no, not really. Even I thought I had a book that was amazing, and I'm like, this is my peak, and it's my second novel. And I went back and started reading it a month ago, and I'm like, nope, wasn't my peak. That was a wrong assessment.
But still, there's got to be something self-gratifying and nice to know that you have something where you have a chance to read it and build off of it and do something more with it.
Yeah, it is fun. I do greatly enjoy it. Like someday it would be nice to have an entire series based on it. My NaNoWriMo is like 3 short stories based in this world. And then I'd really like to do like in the far off future, like tabletop RPG based on it.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, which would just that would be really cool. So, because I've done tabletop RPG since middle school, and starting to get so I have 2 kind of stepkids, but not anymore. And then my daughter, and I try getting them into tabletop. So it's been fun watching them, and they get into the creativity and I can do anything I want. And then just learning consequences. And it's been a lot of fun teaching them different like thinking skills through role-playing games, board games. So that's my pride and joy. My children are my pride and joy.
That's awesome. It sounds like your father was a big influence on you as well. That for your writing, that your father has helped you kind of, find footing in certain aspects of your writing as well. Is that fair to say?
My parents always encouraged it. My dad always encouraged it. He wanted me to go after whatever the dream was,
nice,
to pursue it and to improve. Because I know, like, especially in early 2000, late 1990s, most parents weren't like, oh, you want to be an artist? That's awesome. It's like, why not a doctor? Like, so, but yeah, my parents both were extremely supportive and guided me to the best of their ability within writing. So, yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
It brings me to the conversation that you also have collaborated with other artists and other authors before, and talk a little bit about how different that process is for you versus doing your own thing. How much and how, and if there's any similarities to doing your own thing and working with other authors.
Yeah. So Stephanie Ayers is who I collaborated with, she writes amazing horror. I get to edit it. I absolutely love it. She is fantastic. Highly suggest looking her up. We did an urban fantasy, and it felt like speed dating. It was pretty much on Monday. Stephanie wrote a chapter, and she went, "My chapter's done. Your turn." And then on Tuesday, I read through her chapter. I would make like minor edits if I noticed just anything glaring. And then I would write my chapter and I'd be like, okay, your turn. And that's it. Leapfrog. It was like leapfrog. And when I first was looking into collaborating my writing, I thought, well, how are we going to do this? It's going to take so much effort in order to make sure everything goes in the right direction. My memory is she felt kind of the same way, but she's collaborated with people before she was collaborating with me. And she eventually it just became hey, because I was huge into mythology. We used Finnish or Swedish mythology, which is very close to Viking mythology. So she's like, just do some research, leave some notes. I'll do some research, leave some notes. So we did. We had main characters. We had kind of a direction. And then it was just looking at the pseudo direction and taking it wherever. And if one of us left a hook at the end of our chapter, it was the other person's job to make the hook make sense. And we didn't worry about it. We shot it out and we wrote as quickly as possible and said, we'll edit and make it make sense later. And I think that kind of is like, I don't have a ton of experience, but in my experience, if you're going to do it, like just lightning around that sucker, just back forth as quick as you can. But yeah, it was pantsing to the extreme. Because when you open that document the next day, you had no idea what just happened.
That's awesome though. It's kind of a different it's not a different muscle set because you're still writing and you've still got an idea of where you're going, but it is a different it's kind of like writing choose your own adventure, but then the adventure's been chosen for you and you have to kind of go off of that in that respect.
Yeah, a little bit.
I was telling Paul earlier how gorgeous this cover is, so I just wanted to highlight it. Look at that thing. That is amazing. That is just an absolute amazing cover. So I dig that tremendously. So and everybody go get the Plague Goddess. We'll get everything that Paul does, and he'll tell you where to get it very soon. But
and the cover again, Stephanie. So she does amazing covers. She's amazing to work with. I've always loved working with her. So,
is there plans to do more?
I don't know. Actually, so Joe, signing up for this was me trying to shove myself uncomfortably out of the door of not having written a whole lot in 2 years. I did accidentally publish something in October. I was just told, hey, we need authors for an anthology. I'm like, I guess, sure, yeah. So I sent it in. By the time it published, a friend of mine's like, hey, did the book publish? I'm like, book? Like what? Oh, right. Yeah. So it's been, I'm trying to get back into it. Shoot, I lost my train, Joe.
So it's all good. It's all good. Yeah, I was asking you if you and Stephanie were looking to collaborate again.
So I don't know. I know she enjoys it. I enjoy it. So I'll have to talk to her about it. So, but yeah, I've been on a little hiatus and trying to get back into it.
Is the next thing you're doing a new series, or are you continuing the series that you've the Squirrel series, or what are you looking at right now as far as what is going to get you back on the train?
So the Squirrel series is done. It is entirely wrapped up. The story is gone. I'm writing some little vignettes from different time periods. I've got about 7,000 years of history. So I'm just kind of hitting, like little points here and there. So I'm not positive. I am writing a novel about a dad and his daughter, which I've done a couple of those. Sort of to explore my own relationship with my daughter. and how that is. So it's been very self-discovery, but it'll be a new series and probably some anthology type stuff just to get the wheels turning again.
Nice. What for you was when you finished your series? What was your reaction to it? What did you feel like at the end of that? I mean, I always find this fascinating to see where people are because
Yeah.
you are completing something. It is over. The journey's done. You're not gonna get back on it. I mean, some people do end up getting back on it, but I'm just curious what where you were when you were done, how you felt about it. Was was it, relief? What was the emotion that you were kind of dealing with at the end of the journey?
It was weird. I mean, you know how publishing goes. Like you finish the book, you send it off, and then like 3 months later, you get pinged. Hey, it's published.
So,
Like, oh, yeah, there was that thing 3 months ago. But in all of my books, on the back, I write "Good job, next."
nice.
So as cool as it was, I was very happy. And the only reason, like, this series when I was in college was like, oh, this has to be the greatest thing I ever write. And then I think it was Neil Gaiman said, whatever you're writing right now won't be as good as what you'll write in the future. So just finish it. And that's what got me through this. But yeah, I was happy because it was kind of cool. I wrote a 5-book series. And also next, like, need to do the next thing. So
That's awesome. And writing a series like that where you've got and especially you've plotted it out, you've angled out all the angles you're going to take on and everything like that. Were there certain characters that you started with at the beginning that grew into the series that you had to pay more attention to, either because of the fan base demand, or did you, or I don't know if characters speak to you. I don't know how that works for you, but was there certain characters that were saying, I need a bigger role? How did that happen for you?
I had one who rejected his role.
Nice.
Yeah. He's the protagonist in the first novel. And when I was editing, there was a point where his wife was killed. And then in the following chapter, she was alive. I'm like, well, which one do I want to do? So I kept her alive. And so he goes through a series of scandals and his marriage endures. And in the final book, all the main characters are supposed to get together for the final battle. And they go to retrieve him. And he's like, I've got my wife. I've got my 5 kids. I've got my community. Like, if I'm going to die, I want to die here, not far away from them on some battlefield. Because I tried writing him to go to the battlefield, but I'm looking at his motivations, and like his primary motivation is family. There's no way he would leave his family behind to fight. So yeah, that guy was just like, nah, peace. So
that must have been a fun tug of war.
That it was weird, because do you have it where you write a chapter and then it feels wrong? There's something wrong.
Yeah.
And then you go back and it's because you were trying to force like a square into a circle.
Yeah.
And that's what it was. I kept trying to pull him into it, and it's like he wouldn't be there. Like, his entire reason for existing is thousands of miles away. Like, yeah, no, it was a trip. It was a fun trip.
And you became a father during the process of writing this series, correct? Did you start before your daughter was born, or was it after your daughter was born that you started writing?
So I started all of it before I got married. And then I got married and had 2 stepkids. And then my daughter was born probably around book 3. So yeah, book Book 4 and 5 was written after she was born.
Was there a different perspective for that character because of you now having your own flesh and blood?
I never thought of that. But now that you bring it up, maybe.
Yeah. It sounds like it. That sounds kind of like the motivation a little bit. It's kind of like, there's an understanding that you get sometimes from your characters as well, that you don't think about, right? So subconsciously a little bit.
Yeah. I think you might be hitting something.
The other thing that I really find, that I wanted to talk to you about that's fascinating is your love of history. You're a big history guy. What period would you say is your favorite time in history?
I love the Japanese shogunate. Yep. That is a lot of my history courses were China, Japan. I never really got into Europe.
Mm-hmm.
I enjoyed Greek. I enjoyed Roman, but once you got past the fall of Rome, I didn't care about the Renaissance or any of that stuff. I loved the histories of Southeastern Asia, India. So I try to read a lot of mythology. I love my mythology. And a lot of what I write, I mean, really my goal is to bring people to these really old, beautiful cultures that don't get as much limelight. So just a huge passion for everything that's out there in the world. So,
what was the most fascinating thing you discovered about doing research about Southeast Asia and that period of time?
Yeah. In Japan, their sense of duty, and also even their women had this incredible sense of duty. There was a story about a samurai who got beat up by a bunch of farmers and had his gear stolen. And he said, "No, I'm just going to let it go. I'm not going to worry about it." And his wife said, "No, here's your sword. I'm taking a sword. We're going to kill them, get the stuff back, and then we're going to commit seppuku because this is a huge dishonor, but at least it's less of one." And just like that is a battle axe of a woman. So it was cool because it was even told from the standpoint of one of the greatest samurais recorded in the Hagakure. But
nice, that's a great pronunciation, by the way.
I'm learning Japanese right now.
Oh, nice.
But it is interesting reading all of the stuff that was written in those times because I think it breaks out of a lot of what we believe those times were, which is really cool. Yeah. So,
tell us a little bit about the Scrolls of Chaos and Order. What is the series about?
Yeah. So I created a massive world. The overall premise for the world is that a long time ago, it was shattered into a bunch of pieces. Each world has an evil that it has to overcome, and then it'll become part of the whole world or it'll shatter and come back as a broken world. So the scrolls are Ji-Wei, and it's China, Norse, India, and Middle Eastern, and them working to create the balance required for their world to break free. On one side, they have gods who are coming in and trying to create order, perfect obedience. But because of how they're doing it, they're able to look like the good guys. Like, hey, we're here to make sure that you're healthy and you're fed and everyone's doing what they're supposed to. And then on the other side, you have chaos, which is demons that twist their shape and never stay in the same form and eat anything. And for them, it's easy for them to look evil because they kill and maim and all that stuff. But it's the war between the gods and the demons, and the mortals' requirement to figure out neither of these are good. We all exist within a balance of chaos and order. So, yeah. So the first novel is Gadesh, which is Middle Eastern, kind of around the Old Testament was a huge inspiration for it, as well as Arabian Nights. I love Arabian Nights. It's a fantastic book. And then for the Norse, it takes place in mountains. They don't go on boats and such, but a lot of ancestral worship, dealing with the cold, and just very brutal living. Then the India area is Sankive, and it deals with the demons because that's where the demons are. There's lots of shape-shifting, animal shapeshifters. In the Ramayan, or Rama, oh my gosh. In their mythologies, they have a lot of like monkey generals, bear generals, and it's just really cool how they do that in their imagery. Though, if you're not a fan of adjectives, they use all of them. That's every noun means at least 3 descriptors. But it's a beautiful, beautiful culture and just writing style. I love it. And then Ji-Wei is a combination of Japan and China. So just taking a lot from samurais and their bureaucracies. And then, of course, they are the gods who keep everything in order. Everyone must stay in line or else. So, but yeah, it was a lot of fun. Elemental magic, which I know everybody and their mom has done, but I enjoyed it.
I would imagine the magic was a lot easier to keep track of than the theology of all these worlds, because they all have different theological views. Every single one of these aspects you're talking about, and yet, I mean, there's obviously similarities and stuff like that. And yeah, I would imagine for Gadesh, you couldn't not invoke some kind of religious, text, especially like the Bible, without without talking about that world a little bit. But I mean, it is fantasy after all. But was that something that you were careful about navigating, was all the theologies and kind of melding them into a cohesive series?
I pulled apart as much as I could and tried to make it my own so that it was far enough away that hopefully I don't offend. But yeah, and not only that, like, so for Gadesh, in different eras, they have different religions. So the religion starts in one point and over the years starts to evolve into something else, because just if we look back at our own writings and texts, that's what happens. So I did spend a lot of time trying to make it very fleshed out, very true to itself. Yeah. So there are many pages on the religions of the world.
Is that part of the world building that you did, was make sure that you kind of hatched out the religious aspect of it as well?
Yep. Yeah. And then, I mean, most religions is us looking at the world and trying to figure out the world.
Yeah.
And so the Norse, who live in mountains and it's frozen 9 months out of the year, they worship winter. Now there's also an ice worm that was trapped thousands of years ago, but they don't remember that. They do remember the cold is bad, because little Johnny gets frostbite. So yeah. So just running through, like, what is it that they would probably worship in this climate and with these beings around them. Yeah.
It's starting to make sense, Paul, why you've switched genres, though. This sounds very, very intense and very much like this was like a lifetime of achievement. And so it's kind of like watching a really scary horror movie and then going, you know what? I need a Disney movie to cleanse my palate a little bit. I mean, going from epic fantasy and into an urban fantasy / horror ish vibe with Stephanie, I have to imagine was a little on the similar path, so it wasn't too far away. But crime
Yep.
thriller is completely different, and I know you kind of right in the middle of the series kind of wrote the crime thriller, right? So, or was it kind of toward the end of
Yeah.
the series?
It probably would have been book 4, 5. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's interesting. When did you guys build anything for the urban fantasy? Did you have to do any magic system building or world building that you guys kind of talked about?
Nope. You found out what the world building was when you read the last chapter.
Nice. That's been refreshing.
Yeah. That honestly, I think that's what made it so fun. Is you are firing so fast, like you didn't have time to stop. And think, well, does this fit together? Nah, just go with it. It works now. We don't care. Power creep it is.
Well, tell me a little bit about the goddess. What about the story and what it's about?
Yeah. So it follows a demigod who doesn't realize he's a demigod. And then he has his childhood crush who ends up betraying him to the goddess of basically like poison plagues. So in the mythology, there is a goddess that has, I think it was 7 plagues. Mm-hmm. And the last one was supposed to end the world. So we used her. And then he was the son of, I don't remember the name, but basically their version of Thor. Mm. But for them, like the sea was such a large portion of their life that instead of having a hammer, Thor had an anchor that could shoot electricity. So it is the guy kind of finding his place in the world while trying to ignore it. He's supposed to be a leader, but he doesn't want to be. He just wants to live a very simple life. And it is this village and this trial showing him that he needs to become more. Like, it's his destiny. And if he doesn't step up, it will step up to meet him in the face. So violently. But yeah. So it's a kind of a coming to age, but for like a 25, 30-year-old.
A late bloomer, so to speak.
Yep. Yeah. I feel it.
Yeah. That's awesome. Yeah. You mentioned that, your series is just a little bit of elemental magic, but did you feel like a certain responsibility to stay true to the system a lot more? Was there a lot of the tropes that elemental magic carries with it? Were you kind of staying within those lines and those boundaries, or did you kind of try to break free from what most people would consider, part of the magical system and the tropes that follow with the elemental magic?
Yeah, I tried to keep it fairly consistent. Mm-hmm. And then for special occasions, I'm not afraid of breaking my system. Mm-hmm. I feel that's something that Tolkien did, is he would have a general rule of thumb, but it's like, yeah, but right now I need, and so you do that. So like fire magic works where you manipulate in whatever fire, but there's a being that was created that became the Jinn, and so they can use fire magic in a different way. Or in the Norse area, they figured out how to turn it into runes, and the runes were able to do other things that wouldn't normally be doable. So I try to keep fairly true to my system, and anytime I break it, it's supposed to be like this is world altering, and this is going to change dynamics throughout the world. So, but yeah, for the most part, I try to stay true, but every once in a while, break the shell. So.
Did you have to fight with yourself to do that, or did you feel like that was just part of the process?
I actually find it harder. I find it less believable the people who stick to their magic systems religiously,
Mm.
like the way that say Brandon Sanderson
Mm-hmm.
stays with his magic system. It must be in the magic system.
Mm.
I mean, with science today, we have things that don't make sense. We have. I had a friend who went to Vegas with stage 4 cancer and was told, enjoy your final few months. He came home and he was clean. So I just
Vegas cured him of cancer. Wow.
I guess he left it in Vegas.
Yeah.
But we have anomalies in our world all the time.
Yeah.
And so because of that, I found it harder not to have anomalies in my own writing, just because it makes sense. Sometimes the rules get broken. Sometimes we look at something and go, I don't know, man, like that shouldn't have happened. It did. That's great. Like, cool. But congrats on your like 1 in a million shot here. But yeah, I like having that in my magic system.
Sometimes happy accidents are necessities to kind of move the plot forward too a little bit.
Yeah.
It makes more sense if there is an imperfection, because then you can deal with that, and dealing with that becomes part of the writing. Dealing with it within the writing instead of dealing with it outside of the writing, right? Instead of trying to stay rigid. And I have to imagine for Sanderson, it's probably not all that difficult because he's been doing it for so long, but like for somebody who wants to emulate a Sanderson, I would imagine you might go crazy really quickly if you try to figure that out.
I think so. I try to believe that through work we can improve and become whatever. I think Sanderson has something a little bit beyond that.
Yeah.
That's because reading through the Mistborn series, everything he set up in the first book, he wrapped up by the third.
Yeah.
And I'm just like, no one does that. No one is that meticulous in everything they do. Hey, Devani.
Yeah, it's amazing, and yet it's still mind-boggling at the same token.
Yeah, no, I would never be able to pull that off. So I proposed to my girlfriend on Friday, and it took so much planning because she does not get surprised. And so most of my plan was like, just tumble through it and eventually you'll reach the end point. Because if I planned too rigidly, she was going to catch on because it's not me. like I don't, and that's one of my issues. I could never do like a Sanderson thing because he has such meticulous planning.
Yeah.
It's like, nah, there would be 50 plot holes by the end of like the 100th page. I don't need that.
So my last question to you before we do the questionnaire is, I'm curious, going through a 5-book series, do you feel like there was a certain point in which you found your voice? Do you feel like your voice was being heard, that you found the way you write through that 5-book series?
No, I probably found it earlier. Just because when I was going through creative writing courses, I wrote so much in a week for classes, and then I had an instructor yell at me for not finding my voice until I found it. So nothing gets you there like pressure.
You're right. Nice.
So by then I had a pretty good idea. I wanted to mold my voice a little to whatever the cultural inspiration was. So I tried. I don't know if I succeeded. But no, I would say I had a pretty good grasp on my voice by the time I was writing them.
All right, awesome. All right, you ready to do the questionnaire?
Yeah, I'm excited.
All right, so we're about to do Le Questionnaire, invented by the great Bernard Pivot, and then perfected by the one and only James Lipton from inside the Actors Studio, and stolen here for my amusement to torture my guests. Paul Davis, what is your favorite word to write?
Anything with an S and an L in it. It just sounds nice, like solace.
All right. What is your least favorite word to write?
Weird. I never spell it right. Makes me feel self-conscious.
Interesting.
Yep.
All right. What turns you on creatively, spiritually, or emotionally?
A good song. Like Two Steps from Hell. Like their stuff, ooh, that gets me somewhere.
Nice. So what turns you off creatively, spiritually, or emotionally?
A long day of work, like where you just fumble from one failure into the next. And you come home and it's like, okay, what am I going to do? I'm going to write for 2 hours. Okay. Yep.
All right. Everybody's favorite question. What is your favorite curse word?
So for my writing group, this is one that they made into a meme or a emoji. Hornet ass bitch.
Nice.
There you go.
That's awesome. I love it. It beats the conventionals. I love it. What sound or noise do you love?
What noise?
Sound or noise do you love?
Like just a tapping. Like a tapping on a hard thing, especially like a pen on like stone. Yeah.
So what sound or noise do you dislike?
The sound of my kids grinding their teeth. It drives me up the wall.
All right. So what character of yours would put their face on their currency of their world?
I would say the Monkey King from Sankive, because he goes from nothing and becomes a king of the land. And it's just like, I'm awesome.
What artistry would you love to try that you haven't yet?
Sculpting. That would be so cool.
That's a lot of discipline and a lot of interesting intricacies.
That's why it hasn't happened yet.
Fair enough. What artistry will you never try?
Basket weaving? Underwater or otherwise?
Nice. All right. So if heaven exists, what would you like to hear God say when you arrive at the pearly gates?
Boom. Yeah, that's it.
Well, you came here, Paul Davis, to get yourself motivated to write again and to get yourself out there and make people aware of who you are. And all I can say to that is what you've done today is boom. You've arrived, my friend. Thank you so much for this opportunity to talk to you, to engage with you, and talk all about everything you're doing and you've done. I really do appreciate it. It was a wonderful, wonderful conversation. So the last thing I want you to do for us is to tell everybody where they can get these awesome books of yours.
Yeah. So if you go to Amazon and you look up almost any of the titles, so just typing in like Gadesh or Melna, you'll find it. Otherwise, look up Paul R. Davis, or you can find me at storytellerdavis.wordpress.com.
Awesome. Everybody go do that. Check out these awesome books. And remember that it's always time to go indie now. And we'll see you all very soon. Thank you so much.